All right, not guilty. That was Nick Reiner's plea this morning to the double murder of his parents, legendary Hollywood director Rob Reiner and Michelle, his wife. The famed couple's son had a shaved head and wore a brown prison uniform in court as he sat beside his public defender. The entire arraignment proceeding took only minutes, more than 2 months after the Reiners were found stabbed to death inside their Los Angeles home. Nick was one of their children, one of 3 kids. He was arrested on 2 counts of first-degree murder shortly afterwards. Still unknown is whether the 32-year-old will face the death penalty. The Los Angeles County District Attorney Nathan Hochman said today his office is still working to determine whether to pursue capital punishment.
We take the process in which we determine whether or not the death penalty should be sought extremely seriously, and it goes through a very rigorous process.
All right, for more on all this, let's bring in News Nation's chief legal analyst, Jesse Weber, host of the Jesse Weber Live Show, and Brian Claypool, a criminal defense attorney. Jesse, I'm going to start with you. I guess it's not a surprise he would plead not guilty. What we don't know yet is whether he's going to plead not guilty by reason of criminal insanity.
And look, he has time to do that. He didn't have to do it today under California law. He could do it before a trial. I think there was a big clue today when he also waived his right to a speedy preliminary hearing. So a preliminary hearing is a very important moment in a criminal trial. It's where the prosecution lays out, I would say, a good amount of their evidence.
Right.
So the fact that he's waiving it coming up immediately says this is going to take time. I think they need to understand a little bit more about Mr. Reiner's mental health, his background. This can be a very complicated defense. It will elongate a trial. And in California, you have to basically prove either that he didn't understand what he was doing or didn't appreciate the wrongfulness of what he's doing. And there are elements of this case that would negate that. I mean, you and I talked about it before. The hotel room, allegedly fleeing the scene. So I wouldn't rule it out. I think it's a possibility, whether it's that or a mental health defense that would negate an element of first-degree murder, but I think mental health is where we can go.
We'll get into a couple of those elements in a second, but Brian, I want to go to you because you are a criminal defense attorney. It is not easy to get a verdict of not guilty by reason of insanity because the bar is so high.
Yeah, Elizabeth, in California, you actually have to prove that Nick Reiner couldn't distinguish right from wrong. That is really difficult to prove. It's called the McNaughton rule in California. So to Jesse's point, I agree with him. I think that the insanity train has already left the station. Why? Because he would have been subjected to forensic psychologists the minute that he was arrested. And I think that's what Alan Jackson wanted to do with this case, but he couldn't. The longer you go without him seeing a psychologist, a psychiatrist, and building that defense, the more the prosecution could say, hey, wait a minute, you weren't insane. You went 2 months before you saw a shrink. And to Jesse's point, the amount of time, Elizabeth, that went from when he left that party to when the actual murder took place will be crucial, because if it was hours, he was able to go out and possibly buy a knife and go out and plot and allegedly kill his parents.
What about the fact, Brian, that when you talk about that behavior that night, that was something that Jesse just brought up, he left the house after the murders happened and is seen on security cameras from a gas station walking down a street, and then he checks himself into a motel in Santa Monica where he stays only for a few hours and leaves. The hotel room was filled with blood, according to a housekeeper who went in the next morning. It looks like he was there possibly to clean up, because he's then seen on a security camera with cleaner clothes. It goes to what Jesse was just talking about. Leaving the scene of a crime to go check yourself into a motel and clean up the evidence off yourself is a sign that you know right from wrong. It's a sign you know you have to hide something.
1000%, Elizabeth. There is a legal doctrine in California called diminished actuality. It replaced what's called diminished capacity. What is it? It's basically what we're talking about. He could argue that he had a mental health issue. It could even be a drug issue. It could be depression. He would argue that, and then he would have a psychologist come in and testify, hey, wait a minute, he wasn't actually able,
Right.
to form the intent to commit the crime, so it would negate the premeditation and the intent and take it to voluntary manslaughter. But look, even that's going to be a far-fetched defense because of what you actually talked about. And what those people, Elizabeth, say at that party is going to be crucial. If he was belligerent yet cogent, then that's going to destroy any type of mental health defense.
Jesse, we know that the mental health defense would encompass schizophrenia, which he was purportedly suffering from, as well as drug addiction. It's worth noting, by the way, that schizophrenia is one of the results of long-term drug abuse, and he is certainly a long-term drug abuser, according to his own accounts. But let's talk about the testimony of those people at that party.
Yeah.
The defense now has time to make motions to suppress evidence. What are the chances they're going to try and get all those witnesses who can talk about his behavior that night suppressed, thrown out?
I think they're going to try. Maybe they say it's not relevant. Maybe it's prejudicial. But I think it's a real big problem if they go the insanity route, because I think you're saying it perfectly, is if there's an it's not that he was acting weird at the party. That's not the standard here. It's if he was able to act in a way where he understood what he was saying. There was an understanding of what he was saying. He had this resentment against his parents. It was clear what was happening. You know, for defense attorneys who would be mounting this insanity defense, which again is a very high bar, to have witnesses come in from the night before and kind of negate that, the prosecution would love for them to come in. It establishes intent. It establishes premeditation for first-degree murder. Now, let me just lay this out one more time. Mental health, I think, is going to be a big component of this case. But it is a question, can it negate an element? Can it not form premeditation? I'm not sure at this point, particularly when you're dealing with these complicated issues, but that party is going to be critical, and the people who spoke to Nick Reiner are going to be critical in this case.
Well, at that party, when Nick Reiner got into a fight with his parents, there were reportedly guests at the party who wanted to call 911. It was not a small run-of-the-mill argument or family fight.
Absolutely. And look, these are people who are, you know, very high celebrities in Hollywood. That is obviously going to affect the case. But these were eyewitnesses to something that happened just hours later. And that time is critical in the law. I mean, it's not every time you have almost contemporaneous statements with a killing like this. So I think it's going to be crucial in this case. But we're still in the early stages, as I tell you. I don't even know all the prosecution's evidence. We haven't had a preliminary hearing yet. So it's hard to know what the defense would want to strike yet, or what's going to be this case, because we don't have an idea.
Brian, is the defense case set back by the fact that high-profile attorney Alan Jackson stepped down and a public defender has had to step in? You know, no matter how talented this public defender might be, she does not have the resources that a very high-profile criminal defense attorney has.
Exactly, Elizabeth. You were reading my mind. I mean, Alan Jackson, rest assured, he was coming in. He's got the war chest. He was going to send Nick Reiner to get examined by a forensic psychologist. He was going to retrieve all of the psychological records from all of the facilities that Nick Reiner has been to over the last 10 years. And who knows whether he would even had Nick Reiner show up in court at this hearing today. He might have said, hey, look, he's not mentally able to show up in court. But listen, the fact that Jackson gets away from the case, you've got a public defender. The county's not going to allocate, you know, hundreds of thousands of dollars for forensic experts. And that really is going to blow a hole in any kind of insanity or diminished actuality defense.
Well, we'll see. She does have her work cut out for her, without a doubt, stepping into this very, very high-profile case. Brian Claypool, Jesse Weber, thank you both so much for your expertise. Appreciate it.